Most people have no idea that the greatest warrior of the ancient world didn't just rely on his strength, his training, or the protection of the gods. Before every battle, according to the oldest Greek texts, Achilles turned to a specific set of herbs. Plants crushed into salves, steeped into drinks, carried into the tent where he prepared for combat, and applied to the wounds of the men who fought beside him. This isn't mythology dressed up as history. The Iliad, the Greek medical traditions that followed it, and the fragments of pre-classical healing practices preserved across the ancient Mediterranean all describe a world in which specific herbs were considered essential to the preparation, survival, and recovery of warriors. And Achilles, who was trained in the healing arts by the centaur Chiron himself according to the oldest accounts, was known to carry and use a particular set of these herbs in ways that were so consistent they left traces in the plant names we still use today. Today we're uncovering 7 of those herbs, what they were, what they did, and why modern research keeps confirming what Chiron's students seemed to understand instinctively over 3,000 years ago. Stay with us because number 4 on this list is the one Achilles is said to have used on the wounds of his fellow soldier Telephus, and modern pharmacology has since confirmed exactly why the treatment worked. And number 1, the final herb, is still sold in herbal markets and health food stores today, and bears a name directly tied to Achilles himself because the connection has never been forgotten across all the centuries since. 7 herbs, 3,000 years of continuous use. Let's get into it. Number 7, mint. The cooling herb that calmed the stomach before battle. Long before a fighter stepped onto the field, a warrior needed to be able to keep food down. Hours of physical preparation, mental tension, and the raw fear that precedes combat all take a toll on the digestive system. Soldiers who couldn't eat before battle fought weaker. Soldiers who threw up what they ate fought weaker still. And the herb the Greeks turned to for exactly this problem was mint. Mint grew wild across the Mediterranean and was one of the most widely used herbs in the ancient Greek medical tradition. The plant appears in the writings of Hippocrates, in the records of temple healers, and in the practical medicine of every household that kept a kitchen garden. For a warrior preparing for combat, a cup of warm mint tea or a handful of fresh mint leaves chewed slowly did something specific and reliable. It calmed the stomach, eased nausea, reduced the feeling of tension in the gut, and allowed the fighter to keep down the food he needed for the energy the battle would demand. Modern research has identified exactly what's happening. Mint contains a compound called menthol that activates specific receptors in the digestive tract, producing a physical relaxation response. It reduces muscle spasms in the stomach and intestines, eases bloating, and can directly relieve the nausea that comes with stress and anxiety. Studies have shown that mint tea and peppermint oil can significantly reduce symptoms of indigestion, irritable bowel, and stress-related nausea across a wide range of patient populations. Beyond the digestive benefits, mint also has mild antimicrobial properties, a cooling effect on the skin when applied topically, and a refreshing aromatic quality that supports mental alertness. For a soldier whose survival depended on clear thinking as much as physical strength, the combination of digestive calm and mental refreshment was genuinely valuable. Preparation was simple. Fresh mint leaves were chewed directly, steeped into hot water as a tea, or pressed into oils used for anointing the body before combat. Dried mint was carried in small pouches and used throughout a campaign. The herb was so valued that mint cultivation was considered a basic household practice across almost every Greek community, and the plant grew readily enough that nearly every warrior had access to it. Mint wasn't a dramatic herb. It didn't heal wounds or restore lost blood. What it did was quieter, more practical, and absolutely essential. It helped a fighter stay ready, stay fed, and stay focused in the hours before everything he had trained for would be put to the test. Number 6, rosemary, the memory herb that sharpened the mind. Rosemary grew abundantly across the hills of Greece and the broader Mediterranean, and it held a special place in the ancient world as the herb of memory, clarity, and mental focus. Greek students wore rosemary garlands during examinations. Temple priests burned rosemary in rituals that required clear thinking, and warriors carried rosemary into battle because they understood what modern research has now confirmed. This particular herb does something real for the functioning of the brain. The ancient association between rosemary and memory wasn't superstition. Rosemary contains a compound called carnosic acid, along with rosmarinic acid and the several other active components that have been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier and directly influence cognitive function. Modern studies on rosemary have found measurable improvements in memory, attention, and mental performance in subjects who inhale rosemary essential oil or consume rosemary preparations regularly. For a warrior preparing for combat, this mattered in practical ways. Battle required rapid recognition of threats, quick decision-making under extreme pressure, and the ability to recall training and tactical patterns without hesitation. Any herb that supported these functions would have been considered essential to the preparation of a fighter, and rosemary consistently appeared in the remedies and rituals used before combat across the Greek world. Beyond cognitive support, rosemary has antimicrobial properties, anti-inflammatory effects, and a long history of use for respiratory support. Rubbed into the skin as part of an oil preparation, it increased circulation to the area. Inhaled through steam or crushed leaves, it opened the airways and supported breathing under the demands of exertion. Achilles, according to Greek tradition, was trained in the full medical arts by Chiron, who taught the greatest warriors and healers of his generation on Mount Pelion. The herbs Chiron taught his students included rosemary, and the use of this particular plant in the preparations of a warrior for combat was passed down through generations of Greek military and medical practice. Preparation varied depending on the desired effect. Rosemary leaves were steeped into warm water to make a tea that supported digestion and mental alertness. Rosemary was pressed into oils used to anoint the body before combat, releasing its compounds through the skin and the aroma. Fresh sprigs were burned as part of purification rituals, and the smoke was inhaled deliberately for its cognitive effects. Modern herbalists continue to use rosemary for memory support, mental clarity, and respiratory health, and the research backing these traditional uses continues to grow every year. What the Greek warriors and the healers who prepared them understood intuitively has now been measured in laboratories and documented in scientific journals. The herb that carried warriors into battle is still doing its work for anyone who uses it today. Number 5. Thyme, the herb of courage. In the ancient Greek world, thyme was associated directly with courage, strength, and the quality of being worthy of respect in combat. Soldiers bathed in water infused with thyme before a battle. Women gave sprigs of thyme to the men they loved as they left for war. The herb was woven into the symbolic language of Greek military culture to a degree that tells us something important about how it was used and valued. But thyme wasn't just symbolic, it was functional, and the functions it served were real. Thyme contains a compound called thymol, which has some of the most powerful antimicrobial properties of any herb found in the ancient Greek herbal kit. Thymol works against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites, and has been studied extensively in modern microbiology for its ability to inhibit the growth of harmful organisms. For a warrior facing the reality of combat, where any wound carried the risk of infection that could prove far more deadly than the initial injury, thyme was a critical tool. Beyond its antimicrobial action, thyme supports respiratory health, acts as an expectorant that helps clear the lungs, and has documented effects on the immune system. Studies have shown that thymol and other compounds in thyme can stimulate immune function, reduce inflammation, and provide general support for the body's defenses. For a warrior preparing for combat, thyme was used in multiple ways. It was brewed into teas consumed before battle to support immune function and respiratory capacity. It was infused into oils and applied to the skin as an antimicrobial preparation. It was used to treat wounds, often combined with honey and other herbs and poultices, designed to prevent infection and promote healing. Here's what makes thyme particularly remarkable. Its antimicrobial activity has been validated so thoroughly in modern research that thymol is now used commercially in mouthwashes, surgical preparations, and food preservation. The compound Greek warriors were applying to their wounds 3,000 years ago is the same compound doctors and dentists rely on today, often without knowing its origin in the herbal traditions of the ancient world. The association between thyme and courage in Greek culture makes sense when you understand what the herb was actually doing. A soldier who could rely on thyme to prevent the infections that killed so many warriors in the ancient world could face combat with a steadier mind. The herb didn't create courage on its own. What it did was remove one of the most pressing fears a warrior carried into battle, which freed him to focus on what he had trained for. Achilles is said to have carried thyme into combat, both for his own preparation and for use on the wounds of men who fought alongside him. The tradition carried forward through Greek and Roman military medicine for centuries, and variations of thyme-based wound preparations remained standard practice well into the medieval period. When you see soldiers depicted with sprigs of thyme in ancient art, the symbolism carried a very practical meaning. This was a warrior who had access to the tools that might keep him alive. And if you're finding any of this useful, take a second to hit like and subscribe. We go deep on the forgotten herbs, the ancient preparations, and the traditional practices that still work today, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Number 4, Panax, the all-heal that Achilles applied to the wounds of his fellow soldier. Here we come to one of the most dramatic and specific examples of herbal medicine in all of Greek tradition. According to the ancient texts, Achilles used a specific herb to heal the wound of Telephus, a king who had been injured by Achilles' own spear. The herb was applied directly to the wound, and Telephus recovered. The name of that herb, preserved in Greek medical tradition, was Panax, from the same Greek root that gives us the word panacea, meaning all heal. The identity of Panax in the ancient Greek tradition has been debated by botanists and historians, but the most widely accepted candidates are plants in the family of wound-healing herbs that includes what we today call opopanax, a resin-producing plant used extensively in Greek and Roman medicine. The herb was described as producing a thick resin or gum that was applied directly to wounds, where it promoted healing, reduced infection, and accelerated recovery in ways that ancient healers observed consistently across hundreds of years of use. Modern research on opopanax and related resin-producing plants has identified a range of active compounds including sesquiterpenes, triterpenoids, and various phenolic compounds that exhibit anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and wound-healing properties. The traditional use of these resins on wounds wasn't magical thinking. It was the practical application of substances that genuinely support tissue repair. The broader tradition of using plant resins on wounds was widespread across the ancient world. Myrrh, frankincense, pine resin, and a range of other plant gums were all used for similar purposes, and modern research has confirmed that many of these substances have real antimicrobial and wound-healing effects. The Greek tradition simply codified this knowledge into specific preparations attached to specific herbs, and the use of Panax on battlefield wounds became a central part of the medical practice passed down to warriors through figures like Chiron. For a warrior in the ancient world, where the mortality rate from infected wounds was staggeringly high, access to effective wound-healing preparations was the difference between surviving combat and dying slowly from a relatively minor injury. Achilles is described in the oldest Greek texts as having been given these remedies by Chiron himself, along with the knowledge of how to apply them. He used them on his own injuries, and he used them on the soldiers who fought beside him. The preparation was direct. The resin was scraped from the plant, sometimes combined with honey and other antimicrobial herbs, and applied as a thick paste directly onto the wound. The area was then bandaged and left to heal, with the paste reapplied at intervals as the healing progressed. Here's what makes this particularly interesting. The idea that a specific plant resin, applied to a wound, could genuinely accelerate healing was considered semi-miraculous in the ancient world, and the skill of using these preparations correctly was guarded carefully by those who had been trained in the medical arts. Modern research has now confirmed the mechanism. The compounds in these resins really do reduce infection, promote tissue repair, and support the healing process. The knowledge was real. The effects were real. The tradition that preserved them for thousands of years was not myth dressed up as medicine. It was medicine preserved in myth. Number 3. Wormwood, the bitter herb that cleansed the body before combat. Wormwood was one of the most widely used medicinal herbs across the ancient Mediterranean, and its role in the preparation of warriors for combat connects to something specific that traditional cultures understood about the body long before modern parasitology gave it a name. Soldiers in the ancient world spent long periods on campaign, often eating food of uncertain quality, drinking from unreliable water sources, and living in conditions where intestinal parasites were nearly universal. A warrior whose body was burdened by parasites, digestive disorders, or accumulated toxins fought at less than his full capacity. Wormwood, whose name itself tells you what it was used for, was one of the most reliable herbs in the Greek medical kit for addressing these issues. Wormwood contains a compound called absinthin, along with several other active components that have documented anti-parasitic and digestive stimulating effects. Modern research has confirmed that wormwood preparations can eliminate intestinal parasites, stimulate bile production, and support the cleansing and repair of the digestive system. The herb is still used today in traditional medicine systems around the world for these same purposes. For a warrior preparing for a campaign, a course of wormwood was often used to clear the body of parasites and prepare the digestive system for the demands of combat. The practice was bitter and unpleasant, but the effects were tangible. A fighter whose digestive system was functioning cleanly had more energy, better nutrient absorption, and greater endurance than one who was carrying the hidden burden of parasites or digestive dysfunction. The Greek tradition also used wormwood for its effects on the liver. The herb stimulates bile production and supports the liver's role in processing everything the body encounters. And this aspect of its use was considered essential for anyone facing the physical stress of sustained military activity. Hippocrates wrote about wormwood as a remedy for a range of digestive and liver conditions, and the herb remained a standard preparation in Greek and Roman medical practice for centuries. Preparation was careful. Wormwood is powerful and can be overused. Traditional preparations involve steeping small amounts of the dried herb in wine or water to make a bitter tonic, which was consumed in controlled doses for specific periods of time. The skill of preparing wormwood correctly was part of the medical training passed down through the tradition that connected figures like Chiron to the warriors who fought at Troy. Most people walk right past this detail when they read about ancient warfare. The physical preparation of a warrior wasn't just about muscle, weapons, and training. It included deliberate attention to the internal state of the body, to the digestion, the liver, and the systems that determined whether a fighter could sustain peak performance across the days or weeks a campaign might demand. Wormwood was a key tool in that preparation, and the tradition of using it before combat endured for many centuries across the Mediterranean world. Number 2, honey. Not a herb, but inseparable from the herbal tradition that kept warriors alive. Strictly speaking, honey is not an herb, but you cannot understand how Achilles and the warriors of his era used herbs without understanding honey, because honey was the carrier, the preservative, and the synergistic partner for almost every herbal preparation used on the battlefield. Greek warriors and the healers who supported them knew that honey had properties that set it apart from any other substance available to them. Applied to wounds, honey prevented infection, kept the tissue moist for healing, and supported the repair of damaged skin. Taken internally, honey delivered concentrated energy in a form that was easily digestible even when a soldier was exhausted and barely able to keep food down. Combined with herbs, honey extracted and preserved the active compounds of those herbs in a form that remained effective for months or even years. Modern research has validated nearly every traditional use of honey. Raw honey has powerful antimicrobial properties due to its low water content, its acidic pH, and its slow release of hydrogen peroxide through the action of natural enzymes. It supports wound healing, reduces inflammation, and has been used successfully in modern hospitals to treat burns, ulcers, and infected wounds that resisted conventional antibiotic treatment. Taken internally, honey provides rapid energy, supports the immune system, and delivers a range of antioxidant compounds. For Achilles and the warriors who fought at his side, honey was present in nearly every preparation. Wound salves combined honey with herbs like thyme, rosemary, and panax resin to create antimicrobial pastes that kept wounds clean and promoted healing. Medicinal drinks combined honey with wine and herbs to create preparations that were drunk before combat for energy and mental clarity. Honey was used to preserve fresh herbs through the dry months, extracting their compounds into a form that could be stored in small clay jars and carried into campaigns that lasted for years. Here's what makes honey particularly remarkable. The quality of the honey mattered enormously, and Greek healers understood this completely. Honey from bees that foraged on specific herbs, such as thyme honey from the mountains of Greece, carried some of the medicinal properties of the plants the bees had visited. Thyme honey specifically was considered the most valuable variety for medical use because it combined the benefits of honey itself with the antimicrobial power of thyme. This kind of subtlety in the selection and use of medicinal substances speaks to how sophisticated the Greek medical tradition actually was. The warriors of the ancient world weren't using herbs blindly or honey interchangeably. They were selecting specific preparations based on specific needs, with a level of knowledge that was built up over generations of observation and refinement. For a modern reader encountering the herbal traditions of Achilles in his era, honey is the essential context. Every herb in the Greek medical kit was likely to be combined with honey at some point in its use, and the effects of those combinations were greater than the effects of either ingredient alone. This is exactly the kind of synergy that traditional healers understood intuitively, and that modern research is still working to map in detail. Number 1. Yarrow, Achilles' namesake herb, still sold today. And here is the one that changes how you read everything else on this list. The scientific name of the plant we call yarrow is Achillea millefolium. The genus name, Achillea, is a direct reference to Achilles. This is not a coincidence. It is the oldest and most direct botanical acknowledgement of a specific connection between a warrior and an herb in the entire Western tradition. According to the ancient accounts, Achilles learned the use of yarrow from Chiron himself, and he carried it into every battle. The herb was used primarily to staunch bleeding and to speed the healing of wounds. Soldiers fighting alongside Achilles were treated with yarrow preparations when they were injured, and the dramatic effects of the herb on blood loss and wound healing were observed consistently enough that the plant was named for him. The connection has been preserved continuously from the Bronze Age to the present day. Yarrow is one of the oldest and most well-documented wound-healing herbs in the entire Western herbal tradition. The plant contains a remarkable range of active compounds, including alkaloids, flavonoids, tannins, and a family of compounds called azulines that give yarrow its characteristic blue color when steam distilled. Together, these compounds have been shown to reduce bleeding, support blood clotting, reduce inflammation, fight infection, and accelerate tissue repair. Modern research on yarrow has confirmed many of the traditional uses. Studies have shown that yarrow preparations reduce bleeding, speed wound closure, and exhibit antimicrobial activity against a range of pathogens. The herb also has documented effects on digestion, menstrual health, and respiratory function, reflecting its use as a broader medicinal plant across traditional European medicine. For a warrior, yarrow's primary value was in its effect on bleeding wounds. A soldier who received a cut in battle and was quickly treated with yarrow was significantly more likely to survive than one who wasn't. The herb was applied directly to the wound as a fresh poultice, with the leaves crushed between stones and pressed onto the injury to slow the blood flow and protect the tissue from infection. For deeper wounds, a yarrow decoction was used alongside honey and other healing herbs to create a more intensive treatment. The plant grew and continues to grow abundantly across Europe and parts of Asia, which made it widely accessible in the ancient world. A soldier could expect to find yarrow in the fields he was crossing, and the knowledge of how to identify it and use it was part of the basic survival training passed down through military and medical traditions. This accessibility, combined with its genuine effectiveness, made yarrow one of the most important plants in the herbal kit of any warrior or healer. Here is the part that stops most people in their tracks. You can still buy yarrow today. It's sold in herbal markets, health food stores, and online from specialty herb suppliers all over the world. Dried yarrow leaves are used in teas for digestive and respiratory support. Yarrow tinctures are used by modern herbalists for circulation, wound care, and menstrual health. Fresh yarrow plants can be grown in a home garden from seed and used exactly as Greek warriors used them 3,000 years ago. The name of the plant still carries the memory of the warrior who made it famous. Every time someone buys yarrow from an herbal supplier, reaches for a bottle labeled Achillea millefolium, or reads about this herb in a modern medicinal plant guide, they are encountering a direct link to Achilles and the herbal traditions that kept him and the men around him alive in battle. The tradition has never been broken. The knowledge has never been lost. The herb is still doing what it did 3,000 years ago for anyone willing to learn how to use it. 7 herbs, all of them pointing back to the same truth. The greatest warrior of the ancient Greek world didn't go into battle relying on strength alone. He carried with him a sophisticated tradition of medical knowledge, passed down through figures like Chiron, refined across generations, and anchored to specific plants that genuinely did what the tradition claimed they did. The warriors who used these herbs weren't primitive. They were the inheritors of a medical tradition that had been tested and refined across thousands of years of observation, combat, and practical necessity. Modern research on every one of the herbs on this list keeps confirming what those warriors understood through direct experience. Mint calms the stomach. Rosemary sharpens the mind. Thyme fights infection. Panax resins support wound healing. Wormwood clears the body. Honey preserves and potentiates every herb it touches. And yarrow, the herb that still bears the name of Achilles, reduces bleeding and accelerates the healing of wounds just as effectively today as it did 3,000 years ago. Quality matters more than most people realize. Wild harvested yarrow from clean soil is a different substance from mass-produced herbal capsules of questionable origin. Real, raw, unfiltered honey pressed from the combs of bees that forage on wild herbs is a completely different product from industrial honey on the grocery shelf. Fresh thyme from a sunny garden, dried rosemary from a trusted supplier, real plant resins carefully collected and preserved. The right versions of these herbs, used with the care they deserve, still carry the power that made them essential to the warriors of the ancient world. If you're curious about any of these herbs, start small. Pick one. Look into how it's traditionally been used and find a high-quality source that takes the preparation seriously. Drop a comment below and let me know which one caught your attention. I genuinely love hearing which of these old remedies people are drawn to. If you got something out of this video, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss what we put out next. We uncover the forgotten herbs, the traditional preparations, and the ancient practices that still work today. And the next one is already in the works. And if you're still curious, stick around.